The cameras were live. A production assistant ran onto the stage. He handed Johnny Carson an envelope. And America's most powerful host couldn't speak. It was March 1982. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Studio 6B in Burbank. Another Thursday night. 300 people in the audience. Millions watching at home. Johnny was midway through his opening monologue, a joke about Reagan's latest press conference. The audience was laughing. Ed McMahon was grinning from his spot beside the desk. Doc Severinsen and the band were waiting for their cue. Everything was routine. Everything was safe. Everything was exactly what late-night television was supposed to be. And then a young production assistant named Michael Chin appeared from stage left. He wasn't supposed to be there. Production assistants don't walk onto the stage during live broadcasts. They don't interrupt monologues. They don't break the carefully choreographed flow of America's most watched talk show. But Michael was running. Actually running across the studio floor, weaving between cameras, his NBC credentials bouncing against his chest, his face pale and urgent. Johnny saw him mid-sentence. The joke died on his lips. His hand, holding the blue cue cards he'd been reading from, lowered slowly. The audience noticed immediately. The laughter faded into confused silence. Michael reached the desk, breathing hard. He held out a white envelope with trembling hands. "Mr. Carson," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This just came from backstage. They said you need to read it right now. On air." Johnny stared at the envelope. He didn't take it. Not yet. Ed McMahon leaned forward. "Johnny? What's going on?" The control room erupted. Director Bobby Quinn was screaming into his headset. "Who authorized this? What the hell is happening? Do we cut to commercial?" Producer Fred DeCordova stood behind Bobby, watching the monitors. "No," Fred said quietly. "Keep the cameras rolling." Cameras were rolling live when a production assistant rushed onto stage, handed Johnny Carson an envelope, and America's most composed host became unable to speak. Johnny finally reached out and took the envelope. His hands, normally so steady, so controlled, were shaking slightly. The audience could see it. The cameras caught every detail. "Who sent this?" Johnny asked Michael, his voice tight. I don't know, Mr. Carson." Security brought it to the production office 2 minutes ago. They said it was urgent. They said it had to be delivered to you immediately on camera. Michael stepped back, uncertain, clearly terrified he'd made a terrible mistake. Johnny looked at the envelope. Plain white. No return address. Just his name written in careful handwriting. Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show. The handwriting made him go very still. Ed noticed. "Johnny? You okay, Pally?" Johnny didn't answer. He was staring at that handwriting like it had reached across the desk and grabbed him by the throat. The studio was completely silent now. 300 people holding their breath. Doc Severinsen had lowered his trumpet. The band members were frozen. Every camera operator was focused on Johnny's face, watching emotions flicker across features that usually revealed nothing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said finally, his voice barely steady, "I apologize for the interruption. But I think I need to read this." His fingers fumbled with the envelope flap. Tore it open. Pulled out a single piece of paper, lined notebook paper, the kind kids use in school, folded in thirds. Johnny unfolded it slowly. And the moment he read the first line, his face completely shattered. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1955. Johnny Carson wasn't always Johnny Carson, king of late-night television. In 1955, he was a struggling comedian in New York City, 29 years old, doing small gigs in clubs, writing jokes for other performers, trying desperately to break into television. He was also a father. He and his first wife Jody had 3 sons, Christopher, Corey, and Richard. The marriage was already strained, the long hours, the financial stress, Johnny's single-minded focus on his career creating distance he didn't know how to bridge. His oldest son Christopher was 8 years old. A quiet kid. Thoughtful. The kind of child who watched everything, absorbed everything, said little but missed nothing. One night, Johnny remembered it was a Tuesday, late autumn, rain hammering against the windows of their small Queens apartment. Christopher appeared in the doorway of the room Johnny used as an office. Johnny was hunched over a typewriter, working on material for a radio audition. "Dad?" Johnny didn't look up. "Not now, Chris. I'm working. I made something for you at school." "That's great, buddy. Show me tomorrow, okay?" There was a long pause. Then Christopher's small voice. "Okay." The door closed softly. Johnny kept typing. The audition was in 2 days. He needed fresh material. He needed to be perfect. He needed this break more than he needed anything. He got the job. The radio spot led to a TV writing position. That led to hosting opportunities. By 1962, he was hosting The Tonight Show. By the 1970s, he was a household name. He'd achieved everything he dreamed of in that cramped Queens apartment. But his first marriage had fallen apart. The divorce was bitter. Jody got custody of the boys. Johnny got visitation rights he rarely used because his schedule was too demanding, because the show came first, because somewhere along the way he'd convinced himself that providing financial support was the same as being present. Christopher grew up. Became an adult. They spoke maybe twice a year. Strained phone calls on birthdays and Christmas, either of them knowing what to say to the other, the distance of decades too wide to bridge with small talk. In 1974, Christopher got married. He didn't invite his father to the wedding. In 1977, Christopher had a daughter. Johnny learned about his granddaughter from a letter Christopher's wife sent with a photograph enclosed. Johnny kept the photo in his desk drawer but never called. Never visited. Told himself it was better this way. That Christopher had built a life without him, and he had no right to intrude. In 1981, Christopher was diagnosed with cancer. Pancreatic. Stage 4. The same disease that had killed Johnny's own father years earlier. Johnny learned about it from his ex-wife Jody, who called him one night after the show, her voice shaking with grief. "Your son is dying, Johnny. He has maybe 6 months. I thought you should know." Johnny had thanked her for calling. Hung up. Sat alone in his office for 3 hours. And then he did what he'd always done when faced with pain he couldn't handle. He buried himself in work. More shows. More monologues. More jokes. He told himself that Christopher had his own family now, his wife and daughter, and Johnny showing up after decades of absence would only make things harder. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Christopher died on March 11, 1982. 6 days before this broadcast. Johnny didn't attend the funeral. He told himself it was because the media circus would be disrespectful to Christopher's family. He told himself Christopher wouldn't have wanted him there anyway. He told everyone he was fine, that he barely knew his adult son, that the relationship had been over for years. He lied to everyone, including himself. Now, on March 18, 1982, Johnny Carson stood on his stage holding a piece of lined notebook paper, reading words his son had written weeks before he died. Words Christopher had given to a hospice nurse with specific instructions. "Wait until after I'm gone. Then make sure this gets to my father. On his show. On camera. Don't let him hide from this." The letter read, "Dad, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I wanted to wait until after, because I didn't want you to feel obligated to visit out of guilt. That's not what this is about. I'm writing to tell you something I should have said when I was 8 years old, standing in the doorway of your office in Queens while you typed and I held a drawing I'd made for you. I forgive you. I forgive you for choosing your career. I forgive you for missing my childhood. I forgive you for not being at my wedding or meeting my daughter while you still could. I forgive you for being human and flawed and scared of failure. But Dad, here's the thing, I also want to thank you. Thank you for showing me what happens when someone pursues their dream with everything they have. Thank you for making millions of people laugh every night, even when it cost you your family. Thank you for being exactly who you were, because it taught me to be exactly who I am. I became a teacher. Did you know that? Probably not. I teach 3rd grade. I have 23 students who think I'm the funniest person alive because I can do all your voices. I've shown them clips of your show. They call me Mr. Carson Junior. I'm going to die soon, Dad. And I'm not scared. I'm grateful I got to live at all. I'm grateful I got to be your son, even from a distance. That drawing I made when I was 8? I still have it. It's a picture of you and me. You're on a stage and I'm in the audience, watching you. That's how I always saw us. You performing. Me watching. And you know what? That was enough. It had to be. I love you, Dad. I always did. I hope you find a way to forgive yourself. Your son, Christopher. Johnny's hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. Tears streamed down his face. Johnny Carson, who never cried on camera, who maintained perfect composure through every interview, every sketch, every moment of his 30-year career. The studio was absolutely silent. Not a cough. Not a whisper. 300 people watching a man's heart break in real time. Ed McMahon had tears pouring down his face, not even trying to hide them. Doc Severinsen had set down his trumpet and was wiping his eyes with his colorful sleeve. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny looked up at camera 1. When he spoke, his voice was raw, broken, nothing like the smooth television voice America knew. My son Christopher died 6 days ago. He was 44 years old. I wasn't at his funeral. I told myself it was because I didn't want to make it about me. I told myself he wouldn't have wanted me there. He paused, struggling to continue. I lied. I wasn't there because I was a coward. Because I spent his entire life choosing this desk over him. This show. This career. And I convinced myself that success could replace being a father. The control room was chaos. Fred DeCordova was crying. Bobby Quinn had stopped shouting. Every person involved in making The Tonight Show understood they were witnessing something that transcended television. Johnny folded the letter carefully, precisely, his hands still trembling. He looked at it for a long moment. Christopher became a teacher, Johnny said to the camera, to America, to his dead son. He taught 3rd grade. He showed his students clips of this show. They called him Mr. Carson Junior. His voice broke completely. And I never knew. I never asked. I never showed up. He stood up from behind the desk, something he never did during monologues. He walked to the front of the stage, still holding the letter, and addressed the audience directly. If you have children, Johnny said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow filling the entire studio. And you're choosing your work over them, thinking you'll make it up to them later, thinking success will somehow compensate for absence. Stop. Stop right now. Because later comes faster than you think. And some conversations can't wait for tomorrow. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny looked at the letter one more time. Then he did something that would be replayed and analyzed for decades. He walked to Ed McMahon's spot beside the desk and handed him the letter. Ed, Johnny said, I want you to keep this. Keep it safe. And if I ever start thinking that this show, that any of this matters more than the people who love me, I want you to read it to me again. Ed took the letter with both hands, nodding, unable to speak. Johnny turned back to the audience. We're not doing the rest of the show tonight. I can't. I'm sorry. The audience stood as one. Not applauding. Just standing. Bearing witness. 300 strangers honoring a father's grief and a son's grace. Johnny walked off his own stage for the first time in 20 years. The cameras stayed on the empty desk. Doc didn't play. Ed sat holding the letter, tears streaming down his face. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The network aired the full segment. No cuts. No edits. 23 million people watched Johnny Carson break down on live television. The next day, Johnny flew to Christopher's home. Met his daughter-in-law. Held his 8-year-old granddaughter for the first time. Visited Christopher's classroom and spoke to 23 third graders who called him Mr. Carson's dad. Ed McMahon kept the letter in a frame in his dressing room until he died. Johnny saw it every day for the next 10 years. He never made the same mistake twice.